So recording is already in progress. Yes, it is. So let's get started. Let's start with the action items and the things that are in progress. So the first point is about describing the current status of the object storage, and leave this to you, Matthias, that you're doing a great job there. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it just took a while. It spread across so many different stakeholders. It just took a while for everyone to find the time and the right people as well to even figure this out. Some areas, I guess, were trickier than others. Some were quite obvious, like GitLab and stuff like that. I'm still, honestly, maybe I'll just do it myself. We're still looking for one item that is related to user avatar uploads. I have not looked so much myself at the upload path, but I had some exposure to it from working on the image scaling, which is the opposite way, kind of rendering them out. But so I kind of have a vague idea of like where that all sits. So maybe if there's no answer in the next day or so, I'll just look into it myself. That said, though, I think we have a good amount of data already. So I guess my next question was, is that enough that we can start? Maybe I was thinking maybe we should cluster this a bit to see which of these solutions are related and how, so that maybe there's some, maybe you know this already. I don't know. I probably have not as much, I didn't have as much exposure to object storage, but I was just wondering if there's some patterns emerging that tell us a bit more about how this is used, like from a higher level perspective.
Yeah, I want to cover both your question, so both avatars and the idea of clustering. So I know how avatar works, at least. Yeah, no, I think that I know how it works. So avatars are part of a multi-part request, and they end up being stored on disk. So workers remove them from the upload, put them on disk, and then they are there's a middleware in Rails that just replace the thing so that you have a file handler. Instead of dumping it on the disk, Rails dumping it on the disk, you get a file handler which is already open. You can read from there. So this is for avatar uploads, project avatars, as well, I think, for the instance logo and instance. There are two images correlated to a GitLab instance. I don't remember the name. One is the logo, one probably is a smaller logo or something like this. So
and
all of this
as well.
Yeah, and groups as well. Right. The only exception to this is topic, because topic was recently contributed by a customer, and I was in the review, so I just asked them to do the kind of the right thing since the beginning, which is not exact. Let me just, okay. I'm sorry, I say the wrong thing here. So topics goes to the disk through workers, and this is the exception because avatars and everything else, they just go straight into Rails. So it's a multi-part file that reaches Rails. And so, yeah, they should at least go on disk so that we...
But when you say on disk, you mean temporarily? Because yeah, I'm pretty sure it all ends up in object storage, right? Because I worked more on the serving side of it, but I'm pretty sure they're served from object storage.
I mean this, that we always try to avoid having a multi-part file hitting Rails, because if there is a multi-part file hitting Rails, there is a middleware in rack that just dump it on disk, rewind it, and give you a file handler.
Got it. All right.
So everything we did in object storage was to avoid this. Now, avatars are 2K. I don't know. I mean, they're very small, right? So
yeah, that's small. Yeah.
It's neglectable.
Yeah.
But the thing is that because of these things, so we have code path where we can't handle this way, then we can't enable a shared level of, say, at least everything is removed by workers and put on disk, which is the skip Rails authorize handle. I think you mentioned somewhere in a conversation. No, it wasn't you. It was someone else. I don't remember. But basically, there is Jesus, this is technical. Basically, every request is wrapped by an authorized request where Rails provides pre-signed URL. But at workers level for stuff like this, there is a skip authorizer. So basically what happens there is, this is just a small file upload or something that was backward compatible to with multi-part upload. So we don't care. We just never hit object storage by default. It always goes on a temp file. So basically the answer, you don't get an answer back from rates, but it is generated at workers level and say, this is just an upload, put it on temp and Rails will handle it. So that's the thing. But so I spent even too much time describing this, but the point is that on the idea of clustering, I do love it. I think that this should also try to categorize in terms of how those things are handled in workers. So if they go direct upload, if they just pass through with no interaction, and if they are accelerated on disk. Because this is one of the improvement point. And there was,
yeah, I can have a look at that. I actually noticed that I should have made this a bit clearer, maybe by putting it in the column title directly. I had left a comment on the uploaded how column where I actually listed, I kind of tried to enumerate the options of what you're supposed to put in there. But I think people didn't see it because it was just a comment on the cell on the spreadsheet. So they just gave a verbal description of how that.
Yeah, which is valuable. I mean, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many of these are really interesting in terms of how
Yeah.
they're described. So some good things that I was not aware of came out of this, like the Terraform state file that are encrypted, or there is also another one that I don't remember. So I mean, there is good value in that column, but yeah, maybe
for sure. I just wasn't sure now. Like for me, it's hard to see now which ones use direct upload or not. So at least personally, I would have to go back and actually look at the code to see like what they're doing exactly for a particular type of upload or endpoint.
Okay, so we agree here that we want to move this to kind of a next level where we try to categorize them so that we can have a conversation in terms of clusters of uploads. So what can we improve in terms of clusters, and where we want to drive the final solution?
And what the kind of dimensions should be, because like what you said already, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, you know, is it like an accelerated upload or not? But if you have any other dimensions in mind, that's something that would help me as well in terms of clustering this, because I'm not 100% sure like what is the information we need to drive. Then this is kind of a preparational issue, right? So that and if we want to draw as much information out of this to then drive other decisions in the follow-up issues. So I think it would still help me to know what exactly we're looking for in terms of the categories, I guess.
Okay, so I will say that categorizing by type of upload is important, obviously. So we say the acceleration. There is another one which is there for at least for design management, which is Sidekick uploaded stuff. So we have things that get processed in background and get uploaded on a different type of schedule.
And then it moves files around as well, right? I think we have
eventually they move. Yeah. No, that one it doesn't. Just that one is really complex. But the point is, yes. So we want to know if something get uploaded in Sidekick or in some asynchronous way, as well as all the features that are not uploads, because maybe they're uploads. When I say uploads, I mean user-generated uploads, right? So everything that is computed on our side, or when we actually we are downloading the information on rates for doing something instead of just sending a link back to customers. Because most of the research that we did in this was in terms of making uploads faster, more reliable, or scalable. But there is a good point, which is, let's say we want to remove carrier wave altogether. So in how many places in Rails we actually want to upload stuff?
And when you say upload, is that you mean like something user initiated? So contrasting like something like a Git LFS object, which is more like an implicit thing, right? The user doesn't really care like whether something goes into. Like,
I just make an example to make it clear. So design management. So there is a user upload, which is I'm sending you a full resolution image. So this is the user uploads. Right. Then it hits the controller. something happened there, which is suboptimal, but that's another problem. The point is that then this trigger a Sidekick job. So in Sidekick, we download the image again because it's an object storage. Fine. So I was sure that we were downloading stuff, no problem. But then we are creating thumbnails and uploading them back to object storage from in a different place. Now, this is not user initiated in terms that it's a computation that we are doing. So it's Ruby on Rails that is generating new data and it's putting it back on the object storage. So in terms of we put all the effort in having workers doing all the heavy lifting, then we know because of this requirement that we are actually uploading stuff from Ruby on Rails. And so how do we want to make these things scalable and we have support for everything we support, both in Rails and both in workers, for instance?
Yeah, I think, okay, like maybe we can do this asynchronous as well, because this might take a while to figure these all out. I think I know what you mean, but I think there's a bit of nuance still to figure out. So maybe I can just open a thread on this issue where we can like collect this async kind of like what I think it's really important to understand, at least for me as well, what are the questions we need answers to, basically, right? Coming out of this. So this will then help probably inform what we need in terms of these categories specifically.
Okay, let's continue this async. And yeah, I do agree. Your question is a good one, and it falls into point B, which is about the collection of requirements. So the conversation is still ongoing there. Basically, that's the point, right? So what we want to get out of this describing the current status is making sure that when we score a solution and when we define our requirements, we are not overlooking some implementation or some features that we were not aware of in this working group. So I don't know if someone has point as items or want to discuss the collection of requirements. Otherwise, we can just jump to point C. But I don't see Lucas here, so I suppose we don't have anything on that as well, which is about collecting information about what customers are using, so that we consider what features we have and what customers are using and what problem are they experiencing in terms of defining the requirements. And so, if no one has anything, Gregors.
Yeah, so thanks, Alessio. And wanted to say that I'm still catching up after the PTO, and still don't have a full picture of what is the state of the work in the working group. But I saw some really good artifacts, and I feel I was a bit confused that the blueprint got merged before actually the working group started. But I think it's always possible to actually refine it. And as far as I understand, that's the intent of the working group, to make it a bit more clear how we want to proceed with the architectural change. And we can always update the blueprint. So I think that as we proceed with our discussions in the working group, we'll probably come up with multiple solutions. And I created this Google spreadsheet to actually start scoring them. That's also the place where I think we could actually add more solutions and more objectives. So I thought that perhaps creating this document early is going to make it easier to not to forget about objectives or the suggested solutions. So I added two possible solutions to the document. There's this code name I came up with just very quickly from the top of my head, called Alexandria, what is kind of related to the library of Alexandria, and that's probably a very bad name. They had not been able to design a very good disaster recovery solution that we probably should design. So yeah, so I added the two solutions. Perhaps we could score about the stateless Alexandria, stateful Alexandria. There's also the solution of replacing the carrier wave gem with something more custom, and there's probably going to be more solutions that we could score. I think that right now it's not the solutions described in the doc that is the most important thing. It's more like objectives, and this will allow us to more objectively score solutions. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that? I'm just curious.
Just question, like, what does the score mean? Like, what is higher better, or
Yeah, so it's
more
0,
like
10.
riskier, or
It's 0, 10. 0 is bad, 10 is good. So this is actually something we did in the IC gearing working group, and I think that was actually very useful. It's very transparent, and everyone can actually add objectives and solutions, and I think that's a very interesting way to collaborate on finding the best way forward. And I want to avoid actually, suggesting which solution might be better. And this is this, RFC way, collaborative way of designing, how we want object storage to look like.
Thanks for doing this, Gregors. We actually mentioned this last week in terms of the collection requirements. So the discussion was something like, we are collecting requirements so that we can build a scoring board where we can score overall the solutions that will came out of this. So thank you.
That's great. I didn't know that. So I'm sorry. I should probably watch recordings, but
yeah, I mean, it didn't start it, so you did it. So thank you. So I have a couple of notes. One is, let's call them criteria, how they were named in the IC working group.
Oh, yes,
I think there is an important missing criteria, which is the complexity of operation. So how complex would be to run GitLab.com with that solution? Or it can even be two, let's say one is complexity of operation, which is general. It can even be split in running it at GitLab.com scale compared to running it at whatever smaller customer scale is. But I think we have to keep in mind the operational side of it. And the other more general stuff on this is that here we are talking specific solution to a specific problem of the working group. There is a more of an overall discussion, which is there are many outstanding problem part of the object storage space, and the limited time that we have with the working group will also require us to figure out which is the most impactful direction to follow at the beginning. Because basically what we're doing here is, and it is mentions also your thing about the blueprint. So the blueprint defines a problem and just draft solution, which is very work in progress, because the DRI for the blueprint is the working group. Then the working group is not really binding in terms of allocation for engineers that take part into it. So out of this, we will have a plan, and the first item of this plan has to be actionable in terms of engineering allocation, so that Marin, our executive sponsor, can go through the engineering allocation with the plan that gets out of this, and we start working on one thing, and then because this is a blueprint worth type of project, there will be several engineering allocation to cover future improvement. So I don't know if this answers your question about the.
So it does partially, but how I think about architectural blueprints is that I think of them as a map. So the map that describes where you are right now, where you want to go, and basically makes it possible for everyone to see basically the path to get there. So this is something that makes it easier to make all the small decisions along the way about how to design things, what the objectives are, what things we are trying to solve. So I think that ultimately blueprint can't really describe the first solution, because it's this map would be very incomplete, and I think it should be like more. It should cover like the problem. It should basically tell us where we want to go to eventually. So I think that right now the current shape of the blueprint might make people think that we basically want to just ship min IO and improve Ruby side of things. And I think it actually might be insufficient. I added, for example, this criteria number 18, being able to address future problems, because at some point we will say, okay, so this is the state we are in and we are quite happy with that, but the solution we are designing right now should make it easier to actually solve future problems that are not known yet, for example. And there is this very important objective, designing a solution that is easy to iterate on. So that's kind of similar. So perhaps we should deduplicate these two criteria. And yeah, I think you answered my question. Does it make sense what I'm saying as well?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, just let me remark that the idea of the blueprint was, yes, to define the overall solution long term, but the point was more about making it actionable since the beginning, because we have let's say we can say we have an ownership problem here, right? This is a spread problem. It's a spread, widespread feature set that is not owned by anyone, and that's why it's really hard to take the grasp of it and start working on it. So yeah, I do agree the blueprint should be a long-term type of goal, but what we want to get out of this as well is an actionable next step. So a long-term solution plus an actionable next step that we can start working on right after the work.
I'm not entirely sure yet if actually shipping min IO is the actionable next step.
It's not that one. Is not right everywhere. In any place we are saying this. It's actually, we were discussing this with distribution, and probably will never be the first action item, because there are complexity related to licensing and things like that. It's just that there are three directions that are it's actually described in point number 3. So Matthias, so we can discuss that later on. But the point is that there are 3 struggle points, which are the ones that are described in the blueprint, that are kind of interleaved. So some of them are really hard to solve if you can tackle at least the first step of one of the others. And other solutions, like having specified components, can be an alternative to shipping min IO. I mean, it's just that there are 3 points, which are, we need a place to store the information regardless of so we need a place to store information regardless of what type of feature we are using. We need to remove all the complexity of moving stuff around, and we need to make a decision, not necessarily us, but at least start thinking about the decision if we still want to support local storage or not in terms of complexity.
So let me check if we are on the same page and if I do understand that correctly. So if we think about a blueprint as an abstraction and a map, does it mean that the current state of the blueprint right now is that we basically know where we are and there are 3 paths? One of them might be a trap and it's not entirely clear where we are going? Or is that like the fair assumption about the current state of the blueprint?
Well, not yet. Is actually saying that there are 3 problems that are known, and in that blueprint there are proposed solution. Just to make a point, why one idea, we could remove that in this way or in others, but this is just to explaining a way forward, which was kind of a conversation starter for this working group. So
the problems are here, right? And there is like 6 of them, and there are like 3 possible improvements. And it's from reading the blueprint, it's not entirely clear to me how related these are. Are these things that we want to do in parallel? Like I do see iterations, but you are saying that this is not really actionable yet. It's it's the first sentence. It's not intended to be the final roadmap, but it's a conversation started for the object storage working group. Okay, so the first iteration is to basically have a conversation within a working group, and the other iterations are still kind of unknown right now. Yeah, I mean, this started as a blueprint. It's in itself, so it was supposed to be the original place where we described the solution. Then we decided to postpone because of priority changes, and we started the working group. So
Marin was
Okay.
suggesting
Yeah, it
to
makes sense to me.
merge, Marin and Jared, because they were reviewing the thing, suggested to make it clear that the iteration is just a draft, it's just a conversation started, but the problem definition, I mean, the abstract problem definition are good, and they are actually a good description of what's the current status. So let's merge it as is so that we can have a common ground for conversation. So
Okay,
that's the status of it.
It makes sense to me. So it means that the only actionable point right now is to have discussions within the working
Yeah, that's why we have this working group.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense to me. Thank you, Malesh.
So we are almost at time. So Matthias, do you want to go through item number 3 so that we don't leave anything?
Yeah, sure. It's just a question. I just dropped it in there because I realized after joining the working group, there's a whole lot of discussion has happened in the past, right? I just wasn't sure how much we had looked at these things already. And actually, one of these APACs even it's the one which one is it? It's 483, APAC 483. This actually had passed my team as well before as a potential owner for this. And we were back then a bit concerned that it was like these issues that are collected in this APAC, they all made sense, but they were all, it's just kind of a colorful bag, you know, of like often unrelated things. And I was just wondering if it would make sense to like review these. I don't know how much work that would be, and like to see if there's any like how many of these are even like current anymore, or if there's any requirements we should be aware of, because I don't even know where a lot of this actually came from, or how much of that is still relevant even. Yeah, like it's not like I have any strong opinions. It was just something that occurred to me that there's already it's not being worked on actively maybe, but like there is already, or there had been some kind of work stream that seemed to be going in a similar direction. I think I even spotted an issue here around considering MinIO as like a uniform object storage backend. Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there. I was just wondering if people had looked at this at all. Probably, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so that epic there was kind of a poor man way to make sure we didn't lose track of all the improvement to object storage that we never had time to work on. So it was kind of a box full of stuff that was never worked on. So that's the thing. So it's just a pointer. So what I can tell you is that I may not be aware of all of them, but I've definitely know many of those issues collected there, and that's why my thinking on this working group and the 3 direction we were mentioning before. So I think it makes sense to review them. I would probably consider reviewing them when we are in a stage when we are defining our requirement, just to make sure that we are not missing anything and to figure out if something is still important or is completely outdated. What I can tell you, so the first one that you mentioned in point A was strongly related to actually having the catch all bucket, because the point is that the way the system is designed, you need to know where to put the stuff up front. So if the feature set doesn't have its own bucket, you really can't do this. And because it's specific to the features means that all the outstanding features that were not supported by the acceleration or things like that had to be reworked, which is one of the reasons why they just were left in the previous stage.
And that makes perfect sense. I'm just so I guess I'm also wondering for like visibility and in terms of how we organize things, just assuming, I'm not even saying that's the case, but assuming if we were to agree that this single bucket approach would come to pass in some way, shape, or form, maybe we should just move those more certain items that we will know we will very likely work on, maybe out of this older epic and maybe just into the working group epic, so that we can kind of like separate a little bit like the items that we think these are the most impactful ones or the more certain ones, so as to declutter like this the basket one as well.
We can even make some kind of some set of scoped labels to this working group, so we can set what is still to be reviewed, what is still accurate, and what is just needs to be, we don't want to fix, it's not important, or we just say it closed because it's no longer relevant.
Yeah, and actually I remember as well, like I said, I didn't have that much exposure to it, but I do remember when working on the image scaling stuff that just accidentally I discovered, because I was testing serving images both from disk and from object storage, right? Like locally via MinIO. And because I was unfamiliar with the whole mechanism behind uploads, like one thing, like I was kind of acting as an admin user in a way, right? If you think of personas, like not super familiar with implementations behind it, but kind of knowing the switches. And I was kind of like a bit disturbed to see that if you wanted to go back from, if you switch between object storage and local storage, which you can in Omnibus, right? It's just a toggle. The system is completely broken. It's just every file is dead, right?
Yeah.
So there are like some usability things as well that are quite, yeah, like they diminish your whole installation, right? So I'm wondering, like, this is like, what do we do about these things, right? We kind of don't want to like get people to a point where their GitLab installation is broken and stuff. So I think there might be just some valuable things in there as well, which are very small.
There are migration paths.
Yeah,
but it's a manual operation. You have to run it, and I mean, it's a feature that if you support it, then you have to support it forever. So probably that's what the decision that was made around this.
Yeah, I think actually there was another issue, and then I'm going to stop. I don't want to like get carried away too much here, but there was another one which sounded quite pragmatic, which is like, I think it was suggesting to just lock in that setting, like when you here disallow usage of local storage when object storage is in use, so that you cannot even get into a point where there's like these conflicting mechanisms where they can't serve each other's data. But yeah, like we don't have to get into this now.
Okay. Do we have, I mean, we are at time, so I think we should just wrap it up. I just want to shout out, thank you, David. Your write-up on the requirements is really great. So thank you for writing that. It was really good to see. And
no worries, thanks.
Yeah.
It was from like 1 month at GitLab. I was working on uploads, and it just like struck my face. Oh, this is really, really hard.
Yeah, I do remember the time. So the package team is one that is more affected by all this stuff, and they came after, and they had all the hard time in trying to untangle the situation. So thank you for writing those information. Thank you everyone for attending the working group. So let's keep moving on this. Let's continue, I think, the conversation that we started, and see you all next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.